Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Help Is Here podcast, brought to you by the Beyond Compulsion Academy. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about why you want to watch BDSM porn. The reason I bring this up is I had a message from someone this week who said they've been in a porn addiction for 18 years and they have really escalated into BDSM porn over the last 5 years. Now, escalation is very, very common when it comes to porn addiction. Most people I work with have escalated into content which doesn't really align with their true sexual tastes, their real desires, and definitely not their values. And often they're relapsing and then, they finished and they're like, how the hell did I end up here? That was the same pattern for me that I was kind of stuck in for many, many years. Eventually, I got the right help and I've overcome that problem entirely. For me personally, I was looking at sissy porn and I was looking at femdom porn. I was looking at jerk-off instruction porn, and there was these different categories that I would consume, mostly on YouTube actually, and on social media, which really just destroyed my brain, destroyed my self-esteem, destroyed my confidence, and I didn't really feel like I was living with integrity, because on the outside, I was this normal, regular guy, playing football, running a business and making friends and even having like pretty decent relationships. But then on the inside, I was consuming this content which would honestly just ruin my mental health, and no one knew about that sort of stuff going on the inside. Now, with BDSM, okay, well, this is just another, to me anyway, this is just another category that people get into due to what I call the tolerance cycle. Essentially, the normal vanilla stuff just doesn't do it for you anymore, and so you escalate into content which is progressively novel, maybe it's more extreme, and this is just a function really of being in an addiction. This is very, very common. If you're in a porn addiction, your porn use is going to escalate. I've even worked with some guys in the past that once escalated into porn, which is actually illegal as well. And so the porn addiction tolerance cycle can lead people to getting into very, very dark places. Now, to me, I see this as all to do with addicted neural pathways. And the big problem that people will have is they'll be consuming content like BDSM, perhaps, and then they'll go down this rabbit hole trying to discover what's wrong with me, or why do I want to watch this particular type of content. And so that's why it's really important to remember that, well, these people, they didn't start off watching this type of stuff. This client who messaged me with the 18 years of porn addiction, it was only after 13 years that he ended up then developing this tolerance cycle and going into this more extreme kind of content, right? So that goes to show that, we don't start out with these inner cravings, these desires to look at this sexual sort of content. It really is just due to the tolerance cycle. And to me, it's like, well, let's say you get addicted to alcohol and then you progress to maybe a different kind of drug, and maybe it's kind of not that extreme, and then next thing you know, well, not next thing you know, but due to the progression of addiction and addicting your pathways, that old stuff, maybe the alcohol, it's not really doing it for you anymore, and now you're taking crystal meth or something pretty insane. So I see this as addiction, but because when you're in addiction, you have these different parts in your mind. You have the rational self, the child self, and the addicted part of the mind. The addicted part of the mind wants to keep you stuck in the addiction. And so when you're looking at this extreme sort of content and you may get into certain fetishes, well, what's going to happen? And I still don't know why I can't say that word fetish very well. I can say fetish, but I really struggle to say fetishes. Anyway, we're just going to go with it. But you know what I mean, right? So when you get into that tolerance cycle and you're really, really addicted, you're looking at this more extreme content, the addicted part of the mind is then going to pose the question, well, like, why am I actually looking at this content? And you could go to a therapist and you could go down and try and discover an answer to this question. But one thing I can guarantee is it's not going to lead you anywhere. Even if you did discover that at 7 years old, you went through a very specific kind of trauma and that created a certain brain map which lent itself to, getting involved in BDSM. Even if we did do that, which may be true, it may be to do with something in your childhood for sure. it's not going to stop you from actually engaging in the BDSM, porn sort of cycle. You're not going to get out of your porn addiction by understanding what led to you at a very young age having the desire to look at a certain kind of content. It's just not actually going to change those neural pathways. And there's so much stuff that happened in my childhood which could have led to me, seeking the jerk-off instructions, the sissy, the femdom, whatever, these kind of more extreme sort of content that I was looking at. There's all this stuff that could have happened when I was younger. But when you really break it down, what it comes down to is I was in a porn addiction. I had addicted neural pathways. That's what was going on. And nowadays, I don't really get the craving for any of those content, any of those things. And even if I did, which would be very, very rare, but even if I did, I would just know how to respond to it, and I'd never actually act on that desire. And so it's just not a problem, which is why I can openly talk about this on the podcast and not really give a shit, because I'm just like, well, yeah, I'm good now. I've changed my neural pathways and my brain's rewired. And it's also so important to recognize that, you may have a desire for something, but there's such a great space between that wanting and how you act. And that right there is where you have the potential to, one, change your neural pathways and most importantly, make a choice moment by moment. We do that, of course, with the 5-fact script. This is what helps people rewire their neural pathways. And the starting place with the 5-fact script is understanding that you are going to have these desires and there's absolutely nothing wrong with you for having these desires. It is due to addiction, addicted neural pathways, and largely due to living in a really messed up world with free, accessible, high-speed internet pornography all around you in a society where these sort of things have been completely normalized. If you were to type in like BDSM porn online, you would probably find thousands and thousands of videos. And then if you were to click on some of those most popular videos, I can take a strong guess that some of those videos would literally have millions of views. Like, how insane is that? That there's probably millions of people out there struggling with porn addiction and looking at this particular type of content, which probably doesn't even align with their own values and makes them feel absolutely horrendous afterwards. So you're not alone. This is just a function of being in an addiction, but you do also need to take, in my opinion, if you want to get out of this addiction, then it is required for you to take 100% responsibility to overcome this, and you can do that for yourself. It is possible to get out of these addictions and get out of looking at the BDSM content or whatever kind of porn, but it all starts with getting into the neural pathway of compulsive desire and knowing there's nothing wrong with you for having that desire and thinking it all the way through. If you would like more help with that, I'm going to leave a link below to what we call the 2-fact rewiring shift. Now, this is actually going to get you into that neural pathway without feeling absolutely overwhelmed and like you can't watch porn and have all this resistance. It's going to get you into the right neural pathway so you can begin your journey of rewiring your brain. I'll leave a link below. Thank you so much for listening or watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.